Hey guys, Mellow Modesty here, and today I am going to be reviewing Stieg Larsson's The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo in graphic novel form. As I'm sure you guys know, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo is basically a worldwide phenomenon. It started out as a trilogy of books from Sweden by Stieg Larsson, who is a big conspiracy nut, and then it went on to spawn 3 Swedish movies, and then it went on to spawn a American remake of the first Sweden movie by David Fincher, and then now it is being turned into a comic book series by Vertigo. If you guys don't know the story of The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, it's basically all about how men abuse women, and it's about this main character on the front, Lisbeth Salander, and Mikael Blomkvist, who is a journalist for a publishing called Millennium Press. In the first book, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Mikael Blomkvist basically goes to court because he made a false accusation towards someone, and then he gets a offer by a Hendrik Wagner. I don't know how to pronounce his last name correctly. His grandchild was murdered by one of his family members, and he's trying to find out who the killer is, and so he gets hired, and the Wagners, however you pronounce their last name, basically says, if you can help me find the killer of my grandchild, then I will get you Scoop to basically get yourself out of this lawsuit, and basically to ruin the person that Mikael Blomkvist went after, who is now suing him. And then you get introduced to Lisbeth Salander. For much of the first book, Lisbeth Salander and Mikael Blomkvist are not really a duo, a pair, a crime-fighting team yet. They basically run their own course. Lisbeth Salander works for a surveillance company, and basically she just checks people out, and she's this totally goth. So, now that I have told you the story, you're basically wondering, how is the graphic novel adaptation? It's definitely the weakest link. I have read the first half of the first book, and I have seen both the Swedish films, extended cut included, and the American film. And this is by far the weakest link. To be honest, this is not even worth reading. This book right here, The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo, Part 1, only collects about the first third to first fourth of the first book, so this is not even a complete story. It's pretty weak in just about every department. You can't care for the characters in this. Lisbeth Salander, in the books and in the films, Lisbeth Salander is a really, really strong female lead. In the movie, she's definitely someone that girls can look up to, even though she gets raped a lot. And she's a very smart, intellectual character. In this book, that's not really the case. None of the characters are fleshed out well. Mikael Blomkvist is sort of an idiot, and Lisbeth Salander is basically just a unlikable goth chick. This is very Americanized. It is even more Americanized than the American film. It's very, very rushed. In all of the films and in the book, when Mikael Blomkvist gets set up, he first meets with an old friend, and they get drunk, and they start talking, just basically shooting the shit, and then eventually, as they get drunk, they let their guard down, and the guy who sets Mikael Blomkvist up sets him up. In this, basically, he meets the guy who sets him up, and the guy who sets him up is like, oh, you know this guy, Winterstrom, yeah, he did this, he did this, he did this. It's just really rushed. I'm not really giving a good example, but that's just the biggest problem with this book. It's rushed, and I don't understand why a about 170-page book is more rushed than a 2-hour movie, especially when this is only 1/4 of the series. It's just baffling to me. As for the presentation of, the writing is pretty weak, and the artwork is fantastic, I'm gonna be honest, so let's check that out. As for the artwork by Leonardo Manco, it is very, very good. I absolutely love this cover, by the way. Interior artwork is just as good. It is really great, really atmospheric. I guess both the writer and the artist have spent a lot of time writing and drawing for Hellblazer, and it definitely has a Hellblazer-y feel. Elizabeth Salander is... One thing I don't like about the art is that in both the books and the movies, she is ugly and beautiful. In this book, she's really just sort of ugly. Like, it's hard to describe, but, yeah, she's just not attractive in this book at all, while in all of the other mediums that this has been turned into, all the other adaptations, she is ugly, but she is also beautiful. And yeah, the artwork is, for the most part, great, and pretty much the only reason I would suggest even considering buying this book. As for the presentation of the book itself, it is a nice hardback. It is glued binding. However, I don't see this book falling apart anytime soon. It retails for $19.99 US, which I personally do not think it is worth it. I think that the story's not super good, but as for the presentation of the book, it's very nice. You open it up and it has these really appropriately colored green bookends, and when you take the slipcase off, I really love the font that this is presented in. It just looks really nice. And then as for extras, there's not too much to speak of. You get some, I guess you would call them cover pages, even though this book was not released in issue format. And then you get a to be continued and then advertisements. And those are all of the extras to speak of. So, as far as extras, nothing to write home about. As I'm sure you can tell, I did not enjoy my time with The Girl with the Dragon Tattoo graphic novel adaptation. While I think the art is nice and I like the presentation of the book, the writing is really poor on all fronts, and this is just definitely the weakest version of the series. I would absolutely recommend the French films. What I've read of the novels I can easily recommend, and I'd even highly recommend the American movie, reboot thing. However, this I can't recommend to hardcore fans or to newbies. I would definitely recommend starting with the French films and then reading the books and then the American one. And then if you absolutely have to, pick this up. However, I do not suggest it. On a storyline level, I would give this book probably a 3 or 4 out of 10. Artwork level, I would probably give it an 8 out of 10 for a overall 6 out of 10.